45 seconds.
Goodness, that thing is good.
And there's Mr. Durant before 6 o'clock.
No, we're doing it now. Okay, let's call to order the Planning Committee meeting for May 7th. Please note the gang's all here, all five. And at this time, do public comment. Is there anybody, members of the audience, wishing to speak before the august body? Public comment is open. Last call. Going once, going twice. Public comment is closed. Approval of the minutes. Everybody.
Approval.
Motion Romick.
Second.
Second Mitchoff. All those in favor say aye. Aye. No opposition. We're on to no consent calendar items tonight. The regular agenda item. One is an action item. Peter Engel, approved scope of work and authorize or release a request for proposals to update the Contra Costa Express bus study. You're up.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. This item is approved scope of work and authorizes the release of request of proposals to update the Contra Costa Express bus study. This beautiful document I have in my hand, which was last done in 2001. We've had this on the books to update it for quite a while, but we keep going through this series of the state taking away transit operating funds and then giving them back and then taking them away and then the economy going down. So the bus operators have basically been using their express bus funds through Measure J to continue providing express bus services that they've been providing over the last decade or so. But now that things have turned around and stabilized a little bit, we want to make sure we get this study updated so we can start to look at the best express bus opportunities to move forward. So what we're asking for is an amount not to exceed $150,000 for a consultant to complete this study. The scope of work was put together with work from the Bus Transit Coordinating Committee. That's the staff from all 5 bus operators in the county. And I won't go through the whole scope with you. If you have specific questions, feel free to ask me. I did want to point out a couple things. Task 6 is going to be a stakeholder interviews and outreach. That's where the consultant will be working with the RTPCs, BART, and any other stakeholders that are interested in express bus service and getting input that will go into future improvements. We're also going to take a strong look at new technologies, branding, and innovations that can help. So with that, I will take some questions.
Okay, we're being asked to update a 13-year-old study with federally reimbursable money. If we have any questions of staff, go ahead. Okay, we have a motion, Mitchoff, a second by Durant. All those in favor say aye. Aye. I don't hear any opposition. We're on to number 2. Cut myself off. This is approval of a revised strategies for the 2014 RTP. Who has this year's, Martin?
It is mine.
Brad.
Yes.
I knew there was a reason I said you better get in here. You're up.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Last month, the authority reviewed the goals and strategies for the 2014 Countywide Transportation Plan, and they suggested a number of revisions, and they wanted it brought back in May, and we are bringing back those revisions. The board letter lays out the specific revisions that we made. To one of the goals, we added the word safe to efficient, safe, and reliable movement of people and goods. We reworded strategy 1.4 to move the phrase and so that it says improve the highway and arterial system consistent with a countywide plan, consistent with the general plans of local jurisdictions and et cetera. Strategy 1.5, we reworded it to talk about the safety and efficiency of goods movement. Number 2.8, to change coordinated network up for electric vehicles to coordinated network for alternative fuel vehicles. Strategy 3.7, to revise that so there was a long discussion at the authority meeting about what's a community of concern and did this only apply to communities of concern, but it was we reworded it to say support the expansion of a coordinated system of transit and paratransit service to address the mobility needs of low-income elderly, young and disabled travelers, households without cars, single-parent households, and people paying more than 50% of their income for rent, whether or not they reside in a community of concern as defined by MTC and ABAG. And we added a new strategy, 5.5, under the goal, Invest Wisely, that says, consider the needs of all areas and communities in Contra Costa and funding decisions to ensure fairness in the authority's transportation investments. And with that, we hope that we got all the changes that the authority discussed at its meeting in April.
Okay, and you're asking us to
To recommend those to the authority for approval.
Is that the motion?
I'd like somebody else to make a motion.
Chicken. We have a motion, Bud. Second, Romick. All those in favor say aye. Aye. No opposition.
There's actually 5 items, so we each get to take the
Yeah, it's true. On 3.9, I just would ask that we kind of keep an eye out for, you're going to hear a lot of innovative strategies that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It probably will become support climate change reduction, because there's going to be other things besides, but I don't want to change it right now because we're on a roll, and that sounds good to me, right? Okay, the next 3 items are CMA function, all action items. 3.0, authorized release of call for projects for PDA planning grant program. Brad's up again. All right.
I am.
A double.
Yes, thank you again. The authority receives about $2.745 million from MTC to do PDA planning grants, and we've discussed the program before. The criteria and the basic outlines of the program were included in the PDA investment and growth strategy, which the authority approved last month. We have prepared a call for projects. It went to the TCC. They made some minor adjustments. The majority of the changes that were made by the TCC as part of the PDA investment and growth strategy. One of the things we did, or the TCC recommended, was to reduce the maximum from 900 to 700,000 so that there be more projects that could be funded through the program. They expanded the list of projects that could be funded, so again, that would expand the ability to fund more different kinds of projects. The program generally is focused on planning studies that would help jurisdictions move forward on their plans for developing their priority development areas. That is the key focus of the program. And it focuses on planning studies, that not design or implementation, but studies that would move towards that. The application we're hoping to send out after the authority approves it in this month. We'd give the jurisdictions 8 weeks to prepare the applications. It would be reviewed by a committee of local staff and authority staff. Local staff, as you suggested earlier, would come from all 4 of the regions in the county. Their recommendations would go to the TCC in August and to the authority in September. That's our schedule. So if I can answer any questions that you have.
Any questions of staff, comments? Since I saw someone come in, I would really like to get a hold of this map, this geocommons.com maps, and see what the heck they're calling. And the reason is it changes. I mean, I was surprised that the care areas changed. And Pittsburgh's now in a care area. We're sort of, I won't bore you with that one again. If there's no questions or comments, what's the rotation? I forget. Is it?
Move approval.
I have a motion, Romick, second Durand. All those in favor say aye. Everybody opposes. Okay, 4.1 is a report card. Review a report card on the One Bay Area grant. This will get a comment. And this one is Martin.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Commissioners. Martin Engelman, Deputy Executive Director for Planning. We brought this item to you because we wanted to bring it into the light. This is a document that MTC prepared, and they're essentially assessing themselves and assessing the congestion management agencies on how their resolution 4035 worked, and that was the resolution that established the One Bay Area Grant Program, OBAG. And as you'll recall, the authority went through a process of allocating $45 million in OBAG funds, and we allocated those to local streets and roads and transportation for livable communities and bicycle and pedestrian projects. It was a major effort, and you'll recall there were some major issues with the selection of the projects through a competitive basis. And so we bring this report to you to see if you have any comments or remarks regarding the process, and possibly those are some things that MTC missed. If you look through this report, you'll notice that it's pretty much a glowing report on how everything went well. All of the jurisdictions who had all the CMAs initially were complaining about the investment target of 70% in PDAs, and all of the CMAs met the investment target. For example, in Contra Costa, we were very concerned about meeting the 70% that are within or serve a priority development area. And as it turned out, when you look at how our funds were expended, we came in at 82%. And other counties did even better than that. San Francisco, 96% of the funds were invested in priority development areas. Of course, their entire city is a PDA, which doesn't hurt. So I'll direct your attention to page 421 of the report, where it talks about what the objectives were, what the policy objectives were, and what the findings were. And the first policy objective is to reward jurisdictions that accept housing. And the whole intent of this program, as MTC saw it, was to link transportation funding to housing production, and therefore support the sustainable community strategy and make sure the federal funds are in sync with SB 375. And as it turned out, it wasn't so much whether or not you could grow housing, but it was a more complex mix of various factors that determined what got funded. And the number one was, is the project ready to go? Is the transportation project shovel ready and ready to go? Now, what they're saying is in the future they want to tighten this down, and so we don't know what the next cycle will bring, but the next cycle is going to start probably this December 2014, and it's going to cover FY 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. It's going to be a fairly large pot of money once again, and so they'll be setting up rules and requirements, but the forecast, if I had to predict what was going to happen policy-wise, it looks like they're going to tighten the requirement on housing. The other requirement that's going to kick in is that by January 31st, 2015, all of the jurisdictions are going to have a general plan that complies with Complete Streets Act of 2008. And when we did this first cycle, only 9 of the 20 jurisdictions in Contra Costa complied with that. So one of the questions you should be asking your planning directors, and we will go out and ask your planning directors, and we talked to the planning directors group about this, is, those other 11 jurisdictions, where are they with their general plan amendments? Because where this is heading is, if they don't have this amendment done by January 31st, 2015, they're not going to be eligible for receiving the funding in the next cycle. Through other correspondence from MTC, we've heard that they are going to monitor where this goes, because one of the things the CMAs asked was, well, how do we know if this program is really helping us to build affordable housing in PDAs? How do we know how much housing is being built and whether it's being built in PDAs or outside of PDAs? So we already collect reports from the local jurisdictions that tell us how much housing is being built by type, including a very low income, et cetera. But we don't know the geographic area. and we don't know whether it's in a PDA or not in a PDA. So what MTC and ABEG has told us is that by July 2014, they're going to give us a dashboard that tells us how Contra Costa is doing, how many households were built and where. But one of the questions is, are you going to give us a level of detail that we currently don't have, and that the cities haven't been providing us with? So those are a few of the points I wanted to highlight about this report. And it is an action item, and the question really, it's kind of an open question, is do you think the authority should comment on this report card? Are there any glaring omissions that we think should be in the report card? Because, we went through quite an effort to follow all the requirements. They're happy we followed them. And are we ready to do this all over again? Because that's what's going to happen. It's going to come down again, and we're going to have to do it all over again. And we may face some of the same issues that we faced in the past. For example, the geographic equity issue may arise once again, and if they're tightening the screws on housing and the connection to housing, you'll see that issue will not go away. I apologize in advance for the open-ended form of this. We did not prepare a letter in advance, but we have a few things we might want to comment on and be interested in your feedback.
Okay, first questions. I'll lead off comments. When I read this thing, it took me a while to understand that the commission is the MTC commission, but that's because you have to go back and look at it. I sometimes had the question, is this interpretation of 4035 staff interpretation, or do they actually get votes from the commissioners in MTC? I mean, I kind of remember back when we were doing the joint thing, and I kept thinking that was part of it, and maybe it isn't. But it would be interesting when we get this report card, and I haven't forgotten that's the question you're asking about, Martin, is what we're reading, is this staff's interpretation of where MTC wants to go, and it is their interpretation of 4035. And I don't think we need a staff report on it, just it would be interesting to, if anybody's gone to it, even ask Amy if she comes in, is this the way she understands this? The last thing you want to know is that I heard is you wanted to comment on the report card. I would think that if there were comments, probably the full board should look at it, and if they decide to do it, that would be part of Kevin's domain. But I don't have anything other than looks like the same stuff I've been reading for. I thought we had more people that had our housing element or whatever done, and 11 cities or 9 cities. I thought that we were better shape than this, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, to respond to your question, though, this report card went to the MTC board and was approved by the MTC board.
Okay.
So there's a
There
cover
was a
letter.
vote. I didn't. That's the
It's
question.
prepared by staff.
Yeah.
Prepared by MTC staff, and then it went to the MTC board. And there's a cover letter on page 4.4 and 4.5 of your packet, signed by Steve Heminger and Ezra Report. And it went to the MTC Planning Committee, and the MTC approved it in February.
Yeah. Well, I got the planning committee part. That's why I asked, did the full board look at this, or it's kind of like, we decide that, yeah, these are the comments, and the rest of you don't need to look at this, or whatever it is. But, hey, Tom, go ahead.
Maybe this is where you're going, but what I don't see, I mean, maybe this is just the introduction to it, but I don't see any sort of analysis or recommendations about what this agency needs to do to be positioned to best participate in the next round. I mean, the report card's sort of a Bay Area-wide summary, and the staff report is sort of a summary too. Is that the next step? Or are you going to come back and say, this is where we think our agency was weak, and we need to present stronger plans in this particular area to be competitive next time, and so on? And is that where you're going to go next with it?
Well, to respond to Commissioner Butt's question, we'd like to hear from you whether there's anything in particular you would like to tell MTC regarding this program, if there were things you found frustrating or were dissatisfied with. Staff has not articulated anything in particular except to say when we started this, it was a huge assignment. It was many staff hours, not only from authority staff, but from your local jurisdictions, working this over and trying to figure out what projects to do. It was a competitive process. It was time consuming for local jurisdictions to fill out these forms and apply, and then we ranked them and scored them and selected them, and then there were kind of the winners and the losers, and this report card says it all went great. I mean, if you read this, MTC, as far as they're concerned, it all went just fabulous, and there are no major issues, and we're ready to tighten the screws a little bit, especially in the housing area, and really make this requirement on complete streets real, that if you can't get your amendment done by January, you can't play ball. And we're at this point sitting back and saying it looks good, it's fine. You know, your report card is accurate, and we're expecting you to a repeat of this with stronger requirements, and we don't have any comments at this point. And that's where we're heading. And you know, staff is not suggesting you stick your necks out and go on a tirade about whether this is right or wrong, but we are asking for just any comments you might have, whether you thought it was a good process, you think this is a good report card, accurate, or whether we should say something, because now's the time, because they're going to be reformulating this thing. I think there's going to be another resolution 4035. The whole thing's going to start over again, and there'll be new requirements, and then we'll have to sort it out. When the resolution comes down, that's when we'll start sorting it out. But there's also a lot of money that they're giving us in this next cycle. It's going to be a similar amount, I think, and we're looking forward to receiving those funds.
Does MTC have any set of expectations from us as a board in regards to the report? I mean, are they waiting for feedback from us? They just put it out there and said, here, consume it, do whatever you want with it, and
It's been very low key, and it's authority staff's decision to bring it to you. We weren't required to bring it to you, but we thought it'd be a good idea to daylight this and make sure you know about it.
Well, I'm going to turn the question back, because going where Tom was, it looks nice and pretty, it looks like we got some money, we got to do some stuff, but I'd really be interested, and it doesn't have to be tonight, but to hear from you all, because you had to do the work. You had to give them all this information. I mean, we set policy, but I'm interested in what you have to say. If you thought the process was overly burdensome, if you thought we didn't get the money we should have, if you didn't like, I mean, that's what I would like to know, because I think your input is just as important, if not more so, in trying to meet the criteria and finding what we've decided to be our programs and projects to put into this. You know, do we come out looking good? I can't tell. It looks like we 82% on one chart, and you know, it looks good. But you're right. So anyway, I don't need that response tonight. I'm just thinking if we are supposed to respond back to them,
I think you've really hinted on it rather than have Martin answer it, and that's where I was going on originally. We need to have board members determine if they want to make comments, particularly since two of them might be on MTC by the time this thing rolls around again. So I would just personally kind of look down the line and say, is this something you think that the full board needs to look at this? I'm looking at Kevin first because he's the one stuck with it, to see if they have any comments. I'm really concerned that they're going to do 4035 again, so you're going to get stuck with this report card again anyway. And it's usually a 5-year review. So, I mean, just put it in there. You've looked at it twice, and tell me where I'm off, Randy.
I think, Commissioners, from my perspective, when you look at the program, when we started the program, we got more money than we had before. That was great news. But if you take a look at the process, Martin hit on a pretty key point on it. It takes a lot of work to fill out the forms. The second issue was, after all the dust settled and the projects were selected, there were winners and there were losers, and in our county, we're not used to that. And so if you look at the direction they're headed and you don't make comments, and you may make comments and it may not do a darn bit of good anyway, so you have to weigh that. What kind of role do you want to take in this? Is that they're going to ratchet this thing down further. And then the one thing I remember from the last meeting was equity. And so how are we going to achieve equity when the requirements get more stringent and somebody doesn't have an approved housing element? Those are some of the things that you're going to have to think about. And then we, in turn, are going to have to work with our partners out there to try to make sure that we have the right projects selected and they're working on programming the right projects so we can get an array of projects that are higher in the priority list and therefore fundable.
Well, if I'm cutting through it, what I'm hearing is, yeah, they're going to do a report card again. You probably need to make a comment, even if it's 2 paragraphs. And I'm not sure that it isn't the full board where they're better wordsmithers than me. I can't believe we haven't heard from David on this thing, but that's, I know we will when you get down to the actual wording. But go ahead, Karen.
Well, again, and I appreciate that further clarification, but I think one of the comments should be that it was overburdensome to staff they need to streamline how they get their information, and that Contra Costa County, because I remember you saying that last month, that we can't use, they don't like equity. We like equity. So that's a comment that we think equity should be part of the process. You're right. If they throw it out the window, fine, they throw it out the window, but then we're on the record to that extent. But Mr. Durant's over here with his lips moving.
He's getting ready.
Yeah, he is.
I can tell you that at the Air District, we made a big thing about report cards, and I vaguely remember something in that 9-point plan when we were fooling around at ABAG. Well, I got to choose better words, but when we were concentrating seriously at ABAG about this, I think one of the points was something about a report card or how it was going to report back. But it might be that you see so many things you just sort of think you saw it. So what I'm hearing is, should we be pushing about a report card? I think it's there anyway. I think the update on 4035 is probably the bigger thing. Are we going to get caught if we're not ready for it? And go ahead, Martin.
Just to clarify, Mr. Chairman, the report card is finished. They've issued it, and they're saying everything went great. I think Brad might want to comment about this because, well, it was a lot. It was a lot of work, and they appreciated all the work we did. We are headed for another significant work effort to do it again with tighter controls, tighter requirements, and we can wait until Resolution 4035 revised comes out, and we can see what they give us, and we can respond to it. That's going to be an uphill battle, and so if we sit quietly between now and January 2015, then that's what will happen. They'll come at us, and then we'll be one of 9 CMAs trying to argue for something that maybe all the other CMAs don't agree with. MTC thinks Contra Costa Transportation Authority did a great job on this, and that we invested the money well. So that I think I'll ask Brad if he has anything
Well,
further
let me
to
do
say, 'cause
this
he was the kind of
before you do it, Brad.
thing.
You're asking for a review and comment, and I think one of the comments that we need to give them is this thing dying here tonight, or are we going to the council with this? What suggestion? And before you do, because David's ahead of you, but Brad, they put you on the hot seat, and then David, then Karen.
Thank you. It is true. I was at the APA conference in Atlanta last week, and I heard Ken Kirky say that Contra Costa and the other counties, and I had lunch with them as well, that we did a great job and followed their direction very well. And we did, if you remember, before OBAG came out, before Resolution 4035 came out, we commented a number of times on how that program was shaping up, we and all the other stakeholders. And there were some changes from what they originally proposed to what was finally in Resolution 45. And MTC staff has told us that we're going to get those opportunities again before they come up with daughter of Resolution 4035. So we will have the opportunities to make comments. And they also are going to follow up this report card with some other reports and suggested outlines for revising the program. And so we can, when we get those, I think we'll have something more substantive to respond to.
Dave and then Karen?
I will be brief. One, the staff report is great. The report card itself is a lovely-looking exercise in self-congratulatory reflection. I'm not sure what the purpose of the activity really was, given that we're just at the beginning of the implementation phase of the projects. And so I can't think of another way to say it other than it's a great rah-rah, and I don't know that there's much more for us to do or say about it beyond that. The second sort of concept that I would raise here is Martin, your emphasis on the lot of work. On the one hand, it feels like there's some message you're trying to telepathically send to us by saying that, and I'm not sure what the hell it is. I'm sitting here trying to ferret it out, and I'm lost. So let me ask you this way. Is there some suggestion, hint, thought, notion, whatever, that the effort wasn't cost justified, that the benefit derived from all of the staff work wasn't worth it? Or is it that it was worth it, but you just want us to know that it was mind-numbingly, energetic and time-consuming? Or is it something else? What's the point of the focus?
Okay, I'll tell you, the elephant's in the room, I'll tell
Yeah,
you.
we want you to
okay.
be.
Yeah, the elephant was in the room the minute we walked in. Just
Yeah, so-
get it in the middle of the table, let's carve it up
So
and eat it.
we work very hard, and we're perfectly willing to work very hard once again for the next cycle. When we were done, there were the haves and the have-nots, as you will recall. This report says everybody got something. This report says SWAT got a lot because it says the local streets and roads are just the same as the competitive. Let's see how it was distributed.
Mm-hmm.
And we tried to explain that many times, but we were always told this system didn't work, it's broke because there's no geographic equity, and Measure J is all about geographic equity. So I guess what I'm telepathically trying to tell you is we're headed down the same path.
Yeah.
It might be worse because they're going to tighten up the requirements related to housing and housing growth and PDAs. So you may see even fewer PDAs getting even more money in an even more geographically slanted way. And there's nothing in this report or in what's coming down the road from MTC that will correct that problem. Because they're once again going to say, we don't care about geographic equity on the competitive side, and we want you to link this money and reward jurisdictions that accept housing. And that's kind of
Let's go
where
Karen and then Dave.
that's where we're headed.
One more.
Go ahead, Dave, then Karen.
We were admonished. I mean, to be honest, we still are being admonished for what happened.
By whom?
By some people from
By whom?
the southwest area.
Thank you. Okay. So the last point that I was going to make, which is, as I said, it just sort of felt like there was something there, is it's one thing to sort of lay this on the table and say, think about it and throw us your comments. It's another, given that you live and breathe this much more than we do. If you come forward and say, look, based on the history, based on what we've talked about over the course of the last year or two on this stuff, based on the feedback that we got, here's some staff recommendations for comments that you might want to make to MTC in order to help guide this in the future. I would prefer that approach rather than sort of have it feel like you're not going out on the limb a little bit here. I mean, I get it, but at the same time, we're among friends. I think even though I hate the phrase geographic equity, because I think like so many of these things like sustainability, it's so subjective and easy to manipulate and carve up in different ways. The reality is that the majority of the board has essentially said, whatever that phrase means, we want the money dispersed, and we want to have the ability to have the money dispersed in a relatively equivalent way among the participating jurisdictions and within Contra Costa County among the different subregions. And what would we need to say in your opinion, to be on record. If it's not going to matter, then yeah, ask and answer the question of why bother, because it's more staff time and more energy from the body to even go through the exercise. If it is going to matter, what's the right tool set for getting on the table only those things which we think are necessary in order to have a voice be heard as opposed to crying in the wilderness? Those are the kinds of things I'm nudging at. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense, Commissioner Durant, and I thank you for that. And I apologize for us not putting our thoughts down in advance. But we wanted to hear from the committee whether you want to go to the authority. And it's no problem for us to draft a letter if you think we should draft a letter. But I think what that letter should say, if I were to write it tonight, which I can do, is this report card overlooks the fact that there was an allocation by formula and there was a competitive. And that in the course of doing the competitive, I would say the more affluent communities lost out because there is no distinction between a PDA in an affluent community and a PDA in a community of concern. Therefore, these funds will continue to go to areas that are more like a community of concern. And so what we would want to see if we wanted to achieve geographic equity is we would want to see some kind of a segmentation by income group to say, okay, there are PDAs in fairly affluent areas where housing prices are higher, and perhaps some of the funds should be allocated to those areas rather than put them all in. And I think we can see from the regional competitive thing that they just did, you can see where did in the entire region, where did the housing end up? It ended up at the Del Norte station.
Yep.
It ended up at the South Richmond Affordable Housing Complex, and it ended up in Concord on Salvio Street. And so there you have it. That's a region-wide competition in your handout. It's going in the same direction. So if we say something now, they may ignore us, but at least we've spoken, and at least we're positioned for the next round, and maybe they'll consider what we said.
It'll be Karen then Tom, but what we're asked for is review and comment, and what I'm hearing is that something should go to the board. We just heard kind of formats, how it should go to the board. I just remind everybody, I believe we do have to make a comment letter. We have 3 members of MTC and 3 members of ABAG. Not saying something says something. So Karen, then Tom.
Well, and I echo everything David said, and I think it would be very helpful to have a draft letter. So I'll move that we send this report card on with a potential draft letter, that we had a robust conversation here. And where I'm going is, again, I'm going to ask the question, put you on the spot. MTC pushes back. Are you getting that from the staff level, that is the policy direction? Because we do have members on MTC, and we do need to, I want to hear from Amy. I'm sure Amy's, and Federal, they need to know that this is the issue, and that, who's that? Well, yeah, because she's ABAG, but she's not on. Oh, okay, great. Anyway, that they need to take that message, because in thinking ahead, going to the issues that you're mentioning about affluent communities, those are the people who vote down tax measures if they aren't seeing that they're getting something. That's why whatever the measure was in Alameda lost, because the Livermore Valley did not think they were getting anything. And if MTC needs to be aware that they're biting their nose to spite their face. Maybe I'm being too simplistic here, but it's all great and wonderful to give everything to communities of concern. And I've got one of those communities, and obviously I'm glad that they got the funding. But in moving forward, we have to have that equity issue in there so that everybody feels they're getting a piece of the pie. And I have no problem thinking that should be, you don't have to put it in your comments or your draft letter. I'll be happy to make those comments when we meet in 2 weeks, such that everybody hears, because sometimes that's all it is. And in dealing with issues we all deal with on an elective basis, we have to look for the good of the many, not the good of the few. And I'm still skeptical about us going out on a tax measure, but if we are, we've got to make sure that everybody's on board, because the tendency these days is to vote no. And if they don't think they're getting something, and we've all heard our SWAT friends and colleagues being concerned that they didn't get money. So I'll move that we send this to the full authority with a draft letter. Anything else anybody wants to add to the motion?
I'll second it. Tom, you have comments?
Well, I hear what you're saying, and I understand it perfectly about the politics of countywide support for these measures, and maybe that's the way it is. On the flip side of that, and I don't want to alienate anybody, but I come from a part of the county that hosts the overwhelming number of homeless shelters, the overwhelming amount of low-income housing, and a lot of other things that people in most of the county don't have to deal with. And so I think that I'm just a little leery of saying, well, this community doesn't really embrace the values that these grants were meant to reward, but but that's okay. Let's give it to them anyway because we got to spread the money around, and so it may mean a little money for them. It may mean satisfying the politics of getting their support for the next measure, but it also means taking money away from places that are playing by the rules and embracing the values that these grants are supposed to reward. So I don't know the answer, but I think we ought to be very careful if we're going to send a letter. Be very careful about it. I mean, I think there's maybe another approach to this, and that is to have staff be proactive, and it may fall on deaf ears, but be proactive to go out and counsel these people and say, look, if you want some of this money, this is what you need to do to get it. We'll help you. We'll help you get there, but you're going to have to help us help you get there. And so I think maybe there's a way to do this, but I'd be reluctant to go too far with it.
Well, and that's my question. Is the pushback coming from, it's obviously coming back from pushback from MTC staff. Is the rest of the MTC board, and I hear everything you're saying, and you're absolutely right, but if we don't have the support of those who will support the money, we're not going to have any money for anybody. That's overly dramatic, and I understand that. But I get that it's always MTC staff pushing back.
Well, let me give a point of clarification before Randy gets it. It isn't all monies, or we're not trying to divide up money off the top with cap and trade, with everything that we've done. 25% immediately is off the top for the communities concerned. I swear there's another 25 on top of that it's like they're going to get it. The discussion is on the comments and how to do it using facts. At least that's what I heard originally on the motion, is where is there at least something that we can point to that says there will be some kind of geographical equity, even if it's from a small portion of it. Randy, go ahead.
Well, Commissioners, I'm kind of recall what we had said when this program was just starting. And we made many of these same comments, which, we didn't want the 70%, we wanted geographical equity, how are we going to get projects spread throughout the county? But we're also enthused because we're not a regional transportation planning agency, so we don't get a direct allocation of federal money. If we did, we wouldn't be having this discussion. We'd be getting the money and programming it ourselves, but we don't. We're under the MPO. And the MPO has decided, based on their wisdom, is to mix the CMAQ and STP money and allocate it. So as staff, we've said this from after the allocations were made, everybody in Contra Costa got an allocation. You got STP, and you got these large road projects, roadway rehab projects, or reconstruction projects. But what happened is some of the projects were more ready. I don't think there was any lousy projects. I just think some rose to the top. And in that first cycle, they just didn't happen to be from one area. And I at the time, came from the state earlier where If LA didn't get, or Southern California didn't get an allocation of Prop 1B, they were going to get it from headquarters because we were going to balance this thing out throughout the state. So you got that 60-40 split. That's the way I was trained. But my understanding, and I watched the process unfold, is the local agencies had representatives to help develop the criteria. So it was our criteria. It wasn't MTC's criteria at the end of the day. We all had a say into how the priorities were going to be set. And when the dust settled and we all looked at it, and they looked at it again, they made comments. And they said, no, we think this one should come up, this one should go down. And so granted, there were projects, well, there are always going to be winners and losers in every of these. But as money becomes more scarce, do you really want to spread the money around, or do you want to fund those highest priority projects, as Commissioner Butt has mentioned? That's the dilemma. And
Then I'm looking to you guys. I'm hearing two things from you then.
well, I come from a different perspective, and I just wanted to lay this out. And I back up Martin, because Martin is from a more technical perspective, he's absolutely correct. But from a philosophical perspective, do you really want to weigh in and say, we didn't get to spread our own money around geographically? The question will be, when people look at the report card, they'll say, well, everybody did get a project. And so that's, from my perspective, I don't want you to go down a path that you're going to say something that we as staff then are going to have to argue with MTC staff, and we're not going to win that argument. Nope.
Okay, then.
No, he's still good. David's going to make clear sense.
No, I'm not, no, I can't make it, no.
I'm hearing two things, and I think we still send it to the authority, have this conversation there, and then make a decision, because I'm hearing two. I heard it from everybody. No matter what we say, it ain't going to change. Although I did hear, well, if we don't weigh in, one of the questions I didn't ask, because of the amount of work that you had to do to give them this data.
Turn your mic on, Karen.
I'm sorry. The amount of work you had to do to give them this data. I'm hearing a question is, do we want to do this again? Do we want to participate in giving them information, or do we want to participate in the program? I'm not clear.
Well, there's probably 47 million reasons why you want to participate in the
Yeah,
program, right?
yeah.
Or 48 million.
So
I
no
don't know
matter what
number
the
is.
time commitment and energy and effort is,
It's the cost-benefit analysis.
Yeah, we're still going to want you to.
I think that Martin and the team here is still a little bit hurt, is probably the right.
Traumatized.
Over, getting beaten up over the fact that some areas didn't get money. And it's unfair, and life isn't fair all the time. And so for me, I've let that pass. You can tell me whatever you want, but at the end of the day, everybody got a project, as indicated by the report card. It's just on the competitive side, not everybody's a winner, and that's just the way the competition works. We compete as an organization nationally with everybody else to bring in Tiger money, and we win sometimes and we lose sometimes, but we're probably more successful most of the times than we're not. Why? Because our projects are ready to go. We have an understanding of the rules. And that's the basis of what you have to do is, if you're going to do something here, you want to fix those rules so it tends to favor you more rather than complain about the outcome, because that's done. There's not much we can say about
Okay,
that.
Member Durant, wrap it up. We'll
All right.
get us home.
So this is going to be interesting. I agree 100%, Randy, with what you said. I also agree with what Tom said. The real trick in this is A, it's unfortunate that staff got beat up or traumatized and or feels beat up or traumatized. But this is precisely the problem with having a focal point be geographic equity in a county of this size and breadth. It's a silly, dare I say that, way to look at this if you're looking at the universe from the long-term perspective. One of the things that's always made the authority work, in my opinion, is that it has not focused on the short term. It is focused on the long term. It is focused on trade-offs. Trade-offs between getting money that benefit the county's residents, even if it means one area gets more for a particular period of time, with the understanding that we are a cooperative planning activity, and that those other areas that didn't get it this time, this round, this year, or this decade will get it the next time or some future time. I would hate to have us lose that focus. And it's one, like I said, it's one of the reasons I hate the notion of using this geographic equity component, because I think there are other ways to achieve the same desired outcomes. One of the challenges, for example, with the way that I think we're looking at this is there is a degree to which it feels like there's an economic disparity argument, that the richer areas didn't get so much and the poorer areas did. There's, I think, another way to look at it, which is that the more densified areas got more and the less densified areas got less, which seems counterintuitive to what the program is intended to be, right? Part of the whole process of OBAG, it seemed to me, is find priority development areas, help fund more densification, more urbanization in those areas, even though some of us don't necessarily think that's a great answer in all places. And so I would be hesitant to go too far, and it's one of the reasons why I was saying, what would be the point of making some of the comments? I think it's perfectly reasonable to emphasize or re-emphasize the things that we said earlier. I also think we'd be making a mistake if we didn't recognize in our comments that there was success in this process, that money was spent on good projects, it was spent well, it was dispersed, not necessarily in ways to everybody's liking. And yeah, by the way, if you're going to do another round of it, we think you ought to keep investing in projects that help move the Bay Area, right? And we would continue to assert the hope, if you will, that there would be some focus on improving the PDAs in areas where we are trying to bring more jobs so that there's less traffic on the streets, even if it's not in a highly densified or urbanized area today. We talked about this in a couple of different contexts over the years, but the easiest way to solve so much of our traffic congestion problem today is to put the jobs where the people are, or put the people where the jobs are, right? So if money goes into Oakland, I don't really have any bad feelings about the fact that money's going into Oakland, if in fact what it's doing is helping to facilitate putting jobs closer to where people are and getting cars off the road, if that's part of what this is all about. Same thing with Salvio Street in Concord, right? If the money's being invested in a way that puts more people where jobs are, more jobs where people are, or closer to where people are commuting from so that it reduces the overall congestion and traffic. Or what he just said. No, right? Then to me, those are good and wise ways to invest regional dollars and sub-regional dollars, because it's ultimately about the impact and the I'm going to say something terrible. It's sort of the downstream and upstream impact, and we've always been really good at this here in Contra Costa. Is things that benefit Concord actually ultimately benefit a bunch of the communities around it. Projects that benefit Richmond, if they're done well, done right, they also benefit El Cerrito and San Pablo and so on. And so we just can't be so myopic about this notion of regional equity that we lose balance and focus on saying what this is all about is truly trying to find that balance.
Cool.
I'll
No,
amend my motion.
no, it's the same motion, just more stuff in it. What your motion is to review, because I seconded it, so you got that, is to review and send all these comments up to staff to write super letter, and then we'll put it in front of the full board when Chair Romick's there, and blah, blah. Go ahead.
And that's fine, except I think the first direction was a little bit more critical, that it was okay for staff to be a little bit more critical. That's my word, not yours. And now it's a little bit more ameliorating, and that's fine too.
'em
So
with
I don't
kindness.
want poor staff to leave here thinking, what did they tell us to do? So I guess it's a letter saying, great report card, showed how well we did things. We still continue to be concerned about X, and not dwell on it.
That's still in the motion. The idea is to get it in front of the 11, because 5 of them are going to probably end up looking at it again. Okay. Any further comments? Motion's good. Do I hear any no's? 5-0. And that's what we're on, item 5-0. So Martin, you're up.
All right. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 5 is Amendment 2 to Parsons Transportation Group Agreement Number 345, which is for the SR 239 Tri-Link Feasibility Study and Project Study Report. As you know, Tri-Link SR 239 is a route that would connect the city of Tracy to the city of Brentwood. The connection would be made down at 205 580 to the south, and it would come up to the north and essentially slingshot people into Brentwood and onto SR4 with a significant time savings and fuel savings and benefit for
Slingshot.
freight traffic. The project manager for Parsons Transportation Group is in the room, Steve Morton. Introduce you to him. I think you've met him in the past. This contract originally started with Contra Costa County, and it was transferred to the authority in January 2012, and we've been overseeing the contract and managing the consultant on a $3.6 million feasibility study. That study at the time when the scope of work was developed by the county had a placeholder for the project study report, and we knew at the time that the placeholder was a gross underestimation of the cost of doing a project study report in accordance with Caltrans requirement. It had a $100,000 line item for the project study report, and in fact, the actual cost of the project study report is $961,000, which includes $250,000 for Caltrans oversight. The consultant cost is expected to come in at about $700,000 for the project study report. And we're proposing an amendment to their agreement. There are other tasks included here which have come up in the course of our doing the public outreach and finding out that there are a number of economic studies and cost studies and impact studies that we'd like to carry forward that are part of the original scope of work, and those are included in here for a total amendment of $1.5 million, and this would be funded through federal funds through the earmark. We have a $4 million and a $10 million earmark, and then there is a match provided by Contra Costa County. I'll direct your attention also to item 6, which pertains to this item under other business. We did receive a letter from Alameda County Supervisor Haggerty indicating that he supports our efforts to study SR 239, but has
Stop
strong...
there.
Okay.
Don't read anything further. Yeah, that's the only thing I bring. I'm blacking out the rest of it. He
All
just
right.
supports it.
All right, he supports it. But as a result, we're going ahead with a feasibility study. We're finalizing the feasibility study. We will not be having a policy advisory committee meeting to finalize that study, but we will issue the final feasibility study and we'll proceed with the PSR. In order to do that, we need your approval of this amendment.
Okay. For clarification, 6.1 is part of 5.0. The letter is part of 5. Okay. Any comments, questions, statements? Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I just had a comment. I don't have any opposition to doing planning studies, but I continue to be a little skeptical about this. I'm just going to read the first 2 paragraphs from the Sierra Club newsletter in March. Well, it's a year ago. Maybe things have changed. It says, why would the Contra Costa Transportation Authority study building a highway, State Route 239 between Tracy and Brentwood? The Metropolitan Transportation Commission has rated SR 239 as the worst performing large road proposal in the Bay Area. And it goes on and on. So study it, sure. But I think there's some real questions about this and how it's done. Maybe there's ways to make it better. But I just want to go on the record as saying that I have reservations.
Okay. It's a motion, Mitchoff, second Hudson. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That was an aye, Tom? Okay. I will, the study's good. I think if I had to pick one thing, and I have a problem when I talk to Scott, I think he's listening, is he doesn't understand the ramifications of how we would decrease the freight traffic going over the Altamont if we ever put this thing in. We've got, 39% in East County or in portions that stretch a little bit further. And every time I look at that, mainly because I was out there putting up signs and blowing wind, but the potential, how do you get jobs to places? You make it easy to move freight. You make it easy to move work. But if you just want to put a road in to build a freeway, I think Sierra Club's probably right. But when you, all you have to do, I would ask anybody coming back from LA, is Sierra Club or otherwise, trying to do that overnighter to get back, to blow through Wesley about 4 a.m. and find out that you better get ahead of those 4,000 trucks that are about ready to get on the road, because, and it bothers me that the potential for business, especially at the airport out there, when we had this opportunity to do what they're doing in Tracy and Patterson and Wesley and whatever, has never been realized. And Scott's saying just, route it around. Well, maybe we will, but that's what the feasibility study will show, and that's why Tom's saying, yeah, I have no problem looking at it, and I hope that it comes back favorable, because I've been pitching this thing since the 50s when I was a young whipper. But that's, anyway, those in favor, we already did it. We ayed, we no-noed. There's no more 6, there's no more 7, no news clippings. We are adjourned to the next meeting, June 4th at 6 p.m.